December in Southern California. While the rest of the country is dreaming of a white Christmas, residents of San Diego are dreaming of 8-foot swells and the chance to spend the holidays pulling tubes at Imperial Beach. But in December of 1986, the city was about to make headlines for something other than its balmy weather. Christmas Day at the Knott House was, as always, a special time. After opening presents, the whole family enjoyed a big Christmas dinner. Cara made plans to spend the next couple of days with her boyfriend, Wayne.
She drove up to Escondido on the 26th that afternoon and up to Wayne's and stayed there. But Wayne didn't feel good, was coming down with the flu or something. So she stayed at his house and she basically just nursed him all day.
By the evening of the 27th, Wayne was feeling better.
She, at some point, determined that, well, he was going to be okay, so she determined that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and go on home.
At 8:30 that night, Cara called her parents and told them she'd be home shortly. She left Wayne's house and stopped at the Chevron on Villa Rancho Parkway before beginning the 45-minute drive. An hour and a half later, Cara still hadn't made it back. Sam and Joyce were alarmed.
She just never did that. If she said she was coming home, she would have come home. If she had thought of something else that she was going to do, she would have stopped and made a phone call. She always called.
By 11 o'clock, Sam and Joyce were hysterical. They decided to go look for their daughter.
So we drove up the freeway looking for Cara's car, and Sam saw a couple highway patrolmen in a car and went over and asked them if they could be on the lookout or something.
Finally, at 5:15 a.m., Cara's oldest sister, Cynthia, and her husband drove down the abandoned Mercy Road exit off Interstate 15. There they found Cara's white Volkswagen Bug.
There in the cul-de-sac, they saw Cara's car. Driver's side window was about a third of the way down. The keys were in the ignition. Her Chevron credit card and the receipt were on the seat next to her, and her belongings were in the back.
In the ravine below the bridge, the officers had found the body of Cara Knott. It appeared Cara had been thrown from the bridge, but rope burns around her neck indicated she had been strangled beforehand. While the cops examined Cara's mortal wounds, TV news crews and print reporters began arriving at the scene. The untimely death of Cara Knott struck a chord with nearly every San Diego resident. After all, it was usually the bodies of heroin junkies or prostitutes they found in the ravine near Mercy Road, not that of a beautiful teenager with a spotless past.
Cara was described as this all-American girl. She was beautiful. She was a successful student. She had a wonderful boyfriend, a great, loving family. And we could all identify that. I think there was a tremendous feeling of sadness.
In response, Channel 7 News had run a piece on traffic safety. The star of that piece, as always, was Highway Patrolman Craig Pyre. The segment was supposed to generate positive feedback from local drivers, but it resulted in a lot of calls from women who had been stopped near the Mercy Road exit of I-15 by Officer Craig Pyre.
There were over 20 young women who looked somewhat similar to Cara Knott and were driving somewhat similar cars who had a similar story. He had stopped them for either minor or non-existence violations. He had taken them down to the same area off of Mercy Road, held them for a while, and then let them go.
Several days after the murder, we were in briefing. At that time, a young female officer who'd been on the job a short time, who had actually done some ride-alongs with Craig Pyre, suddenly just kind of turned around and in a joking manner pointed at Craig, who was in the back of the room, and said, "Pyre, you did it." I remember you telling me on the ride-along, if you ever killed anybody, you would throw them off the bridge at Mercy Road. I was kind of sitting sideways in my chair, and I'd look back at Pyre. Everybody else had looked forward, and I noticed that he would frozen and looked like he was turned white as a ghost and was about ready to throw up.
1 week after Cara Nott's murder, the San Diego Police Department began a formal investigation of Craig Pyre. Investigating a fellow law enforcement officer is always a difficult task. Luckily for the San Diego PD, the new initiative between departments to collaborate on crime fighting made the investigation much easier. But even though he was one of their own, the California Highway Patrol volunteered to secretly search Craig Pyre's squad car. During that search, they found a rope in Pyre's trunk.
She had the ligature marks around her neck from the rope, and the size of the rope was consistent. The rope that was on the trunk of his car was consistent with those marks. The forensic experts determined that.
The cops also discovered another bizarre pattern in Pyre's traffic stops.
He made lots and lots of traffic stops, and we tried real hard to find a pattern of males being stopped in that same area and could not do it.
Somewhere along the line, he found that he liked to pull over young women. His pattern was, if he saw a young woman who looked to be alone, he'd pull her off, hit the red light, and direct her down a freeway ramp that was not completed. It was dark down there, and he'd sit and talk.
When the cops did sink their teeth into the case, they came up with another damning piece of physical evidence.
She had a contusion across her forehead that was consistent with a police flashlight being the instrument that struck her.
Between the flashlight injuries and the rope, the complaints from female motorists, the cops had no choice but to throw the book at Craig Pyre. On January 16, 1987, they arrested him for the murder of Cara Nott. The arrest of the area's most recognizable officer sent shockwaves through the entire San Diego community.
It was shocking enough to us that this woman could be driving along in her car and somehow be pulled out of it and murdered. But when we found out that a peace officer was responsible for it, that really affected a lot of people.
You teach your children to trust policemen. If you're in trouble, go to a policeman. You kept thinking they were going to find somebody else that was responsible for it. It couldn't possibly be a highway patrolman.
As the evidence continued to mount, the city's attitude toward local law enforcement grew increasingly skeptical.
I feel like I am unsafe on the roads nowadays because of this incident.
I'll tell you one thing, I won't open the window when a police stops me. I'll have it cracked, but that's about it.
It hurt us. It hurt those of us that do our job well, because the community was looking at us like, well, we can't really trust them as much now.
On May 27, 1987, the California Highway Patrol officially fired Craig Pyre. That, coupled with the negative press, made the former patrolman public enemy #1. And by the time Craig Pyre's murder trial got underway on January 20th of 1988, those hard feelings had only gotten harder.
It was really the prime thing that most people would discuss with one another. And most of them were hopeful that this man would be held accountable and that justice would prevail.
My theory is that she was down at that cul-de-sac with Craig Pyre, and Cara Nott thought that this was strange behavior, it was weird behavior, and perhaps threatened that she would reveal that this was unacceptable behavior. I think what happened was that she began to struggle, and Craig Pyre hit her with his flashlight because it was a dark night and they were out in a deserted location, and he hit her. And then he recognized at that point that this was it for him. If she were to leave and tell her father and tell other people that she had been struck down at this location by a CHP officer, this whole secret existence of his would unravel. And he had to make a very calculated decision. And the decision was, it's her or me? And he chose himself and killed her.
The jury believed the prosecution's theory.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Craig Allen Pyre, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Craig Pyre, the officer who had once been the face of the California Highway Patrol, was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. For the Knott family, the sentence brought little consolation after a year and a half of pain, heartbreak, and legal turmoil.
I remember when they said he was guilty, and my first reaction was, well, now we can have her back. It was almost like, we've gotten this out of the way. Okay, come home, Cara. It's done. But there wasn't the joy that we expected. Relief, maybe, but not joy.
The Knott family will never get over the loss of Cara, and they are not alone. The California Highway Patrol still remembers the day they let down both Cara Knott and the greater San Diego community.
I think some of them still carry in their heart the shame of one of their own having done this. They didn't want to believe it. It was proven to them. They believed it, and they wanted even more to do the job the right way.
As for the deserted exit ramp where the brutal murder took place, today is a crime victims memorial park founded by Cara's father, Sam Knott. After Cara's death, Sam became the foremost champion of victims' rights in the state of California, working with lawmakers to help pass groundbreaking legislation. He devoted his life to help police departments create better communication systems. Even today, just mention the words Mercy Road or the name Cara Knott, and everyone in San Diego has the same reaction: guilt, sadness, and anger at a system that failed to protect and serve one of its kindest and most trusting young residents.